Hi, this is Eric Lofholm, and this is going to be an off the cuff, unscripted video. I just want to talk about my life, give you some background about my life, and why would you be interested in my life? Well, I have a lot of clients that I mentor, and I have some of my students. I've worked with them for over a decade. And if you're somebody that's considering working with me or you're already working with me, you might find some of these things interesting. I don't think that my life is necessarily all that interesting, but I do know that with my mentors, I've enjoyed, understanding about their background. How do they develop some of their ideas? What were some of their struggles? And so the reason to watch this is if you're somebody who you feel really connected to me and you just want to get to know me a little bit better, so you feel that you knowing this could assist you in us working together, then that would be the reason to watch this. And I'll probably weave in some success principles, drop some golden nuggets in here, point out some things that have been instrumental for me. I grew up in Kentfield, California, which is in Marin County. And Marin is associated with wealth. It's one of the wealthiest areas, Kentfield is, of Marin. And it's kind of in a way, it's like Beverly Hills, except not when I was growing up. When I was growing up, my parents, my mom and dad, they were together when they moved to Marin. And that's just where young families went. Now I live in Rockland, California. I have 4 children, 2 of my own, and then my 2 stepdaughters, my bonus daughters, Bella and Emily, and then my 2 are Brandon and Sarah. And young couples with young kids, this is where they raise families, in Rockland. So Marin back then was not a wealthy area. I did not grow up wealthy. We didn't grow up poor. I mean, I always had, clothes to wear and shoes and food in the fridge, but we weren't wealthy by any stretch. Many times growing up, we were tight financially, really not doing that well. And I grew up mostly from age 10 on. I was with my stepmother and my dad. And my mom at that time lived a couple of hours away. And it was my sister and myself and my stepmom and my dad. And my dad and his new wife, they had 3 children. And so we grew up that way. And I was really, I am an introvert, which may surprise you. And I didn't know how to connect with kids. I had a very small network of friends, and I didn't know how to reach out to people and make new friendships, which is ironic now because I reach out anywhere from 1 to 10 people a day. I just cold prospect people. I'll boldly prospect anybody now. But back then, I didn't know how to connect and communicate and build rapport with other kids. I didn't date at all in high school. I never went to any of the dances in high school because I just didn't know how to connect, which might surprise some of you because now I'm one of the world's leading experts at teaching sales and communication skills. But that's part of what got me so good at it. Because as I got older, I learned about scripting. And scripting basically means you're going to prepare in advance what you're going to say to influence the outcome of that communication. So I learned how to get predictable yeses, and it made me great in sales because I was just so obsessed. I was so fascinated by the fact that you could communicate with somebody in a way that caused them to like you. You could communicate with somebody in a way that motivated them to say yes. And that was my struggles early in my life is what ultimately made me great in sales. Everyone in my family is college educated, except me. And my dad and mom, they both went to Berkeley. And my sister went to UCLA. And so it was kind of expected that I would go to a UC school, and I UC school means UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Riverside, UC San Diego. And I applied to 7 UC schools and got into 0. And Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara sent me a letter, and they said, if you go to a junior college for 1 year, we'll guarantee you admittance your sophomore year. So I decided to go to Sierra College, which is a junior college here in Rockland, where I now live. And my mom at the time, and she still is in the area here, she's in Placer County. And that first year I moved in with my mom and my stepdad, and I would commute down to the school, and that's when I started working at McDonald's. And I ended up at Sierra College for a little over 4 years, 4.5 years, and then I did 1 semester kind of at Sac State. I say kind of because I started and then I dropped out, and then I just stopped going to college. And I experienced transformation when I got a call from my stepmom one day. And this is before cell phones. And she and I weren't particularly close. At the time, I was 20, 21 years old, and I was living up in the Sacramento area, and she was down in Marin with my dad and my younger brothers and sisters. And she called me up, and she said, Eric, I really want you to come to this seminar with me. And it was a real estate investment seminar. And it's a little unusual because we weren't really that close, and it was just kind of this random thing out of the blue, like, hey, come to the seminar. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I went to the seminar. I drove a couple hours, took a day off my job at McDonald's, drove from Sacramento down to Oakland, and I attended the seminar, and that's where I met Dante Pirano. And Dante is one of the most incredible speakers in the world. I mean, just amazing. Very first seminar I ever attended, here's one of the great speakers of all time, Dante Pirano. And he had a course for sale. I didn't have any money. My stepmom, she bought the course. We went, we did it together. And a series of events happened, and I ended up going to work for Dante. I moved from California to Reno, Nevada, and I took a phone sales job working for Dante. And I was engaged at the time to my fiance. Her name is Jairus. And so she was in California, and I went to Reno to go work for Dante. And she came to visit me a couple weeks after I'd been there, and I didn't know anybody in Reno. And I was lonely, and I was missing her, and I was in this strange place, and I wanted her to come live with me. And I said, well, will you move to Reno? And she says, well, we can't live together unless we're married. She at the time was 18 years old, and I was 22. And I said, well, I already proposed to you. We're engaged. Why don't we get married? She said, when would we do that? I said, how about Saturday? So we eloped at the Heart of Reno Chapel in Reno, Nevada on December 19th, 1992. And that was you get married. It's a huge turning point in your life. So now we're married, and I become Dante's assistant. So I'm now the assistant of a multimillionaire, brilliant speaker, and then I'm doing phone sales. And it was then that I met Dr. Moyne. And I met Dr. Moyne through Tony Martinez. Tony worked for Dante and was Dante's top speaker. And Tony had become a friend of mine. And Tony took me under his wing, and he's been a mentor of mine for many years, still to this day. And Tony said, do you want to meet the world's most brilliant sales mind? I said, sure. He says, my coach, Dr. Moyne, is coming into Reno. We're doing an all-day coaching session, and you can come to dinner with us. And that's when I met Dr. Moyne. And I was about to get fired from Dante's job because I didn't know how to sell. And I was the bottom producer, and I misquoted 2 months in a row. And I started implementing Dr. Moyne's ideas. And it was mainly what Tony taught me. But it was Dr. Moyne's ideas through Tony. And eventually I became the top producer on my sales team working for Dante. And so that's kind of that story. That's how I met Dr. Moyne. And a series of events happened, and I ended up going to work for Tony Robbins. And let me just fill in a couple blanks here. I started a telemarketing company in between Dante and Tony Robbins called North American Comtel Corporation. It's my first company I ever had. Had no idea what I was doing. Didn't know how to run a company. Didn't know how to hire, train, recruit. I didn't understand HR. Didn't know how to run a budget. And the company failed. Surprise, surprise. And when the company failed, I felt like I was a failure. And so Jairus and I ended up separating. And she moved back to California to move back. She started living with my mother and my stepdad. And I became homeless, and I was sleeping in my Honda Civic. It was a hatchback, and I was sleeping in the back seat. And a friend of mine named David Fryer opened up his home, and I ended up going to live with David and started waiting tables on a graveyard shift at Harrah's Casino in the coffee shop. So I did that for a while, and then Jairus and we got back together, and we ended up moving down to San Diego, and that's when I started my stint with Tony Robbins. So that'll conclude part one of my story, and I'll probably do several other parts. I'm not sure how many, but that's part one. And if you want to learn more about my background, you can go on to part two. And thanks for watching.